Hello everyone, Jason Warren with DT Met, and today we'll be discussing the big storm system we expect to impact portions of the eastern United States at the end of next week. Plus we'll be talking about the potential for a white Christmas across the lower 48. Currently, across the lower 48, we're in the middle of a pattern change where we've seen a lot of cold weather and storminess out west and mild weather elsewhere across the country, but that is switching now, where we're going to start to see ridging out west and a lot more troughing and cold air potential in the eastern United States. What we're looking at here is the PNA, or the Pacific North American Oscillation, and typically when we see it negative, as we did from the beginning of December, actually back into late November, all the way into mid-December, it was negative, and typically when we see that, it's stormy and cold across the west and less so across the remainder of the country. But the forecast moving forward, it's near neutral now, and the forecast moving forward is for the PNA to turn positive as we head into the middle and latter portions of December. And that typically would herald a much colder pattern for the central and eastern United States and mild weather in the west. The North Atlantic Oscillation, or the NAO, however, is near neutral at this time. It had been negative for much of the beginning and into the middle portions of the month with that big Greenland block that we had been observing, but in recent days it has turned more neutral and even a little positive, and is forecast to remain near neutral for the remainder of the month. Typically, for a big East Coast system, one that rides right up the East Coast and brings big snows to the big cities of the East and all the way up into New England, you would like to see a negative NAO. So we'll have to see how the whole pattern evolves during the upcoming week and see how things play out. With all of these things in mind, let's go ahead and look at the models. So what we're going to take a look at first is the temperatures, where we expect the cold air to be, because this is where we're most confident. And right now, this is where we have the cold air in place across portions of the upper Midwest, back into the central and northern Rockies, and this is going to spread eastward across the Great Lakes and into the Northeast over the next couple of days. As we head through the upcoming weekend and into the beginning of next week is when we'll begin to see the big push of Arctic air from Canada come down into the north central U.S. And this is just the beginning of what's going to be a major Arctic outbreak for the United States. If we move this forward, you can see a big chunk of Arctic air spreads eastward across the Great Lakes as we head into the middle of next week, but the Arctic air reloads over portions of the front range of the northern Rockies and over the plains of western Canada, and this is the Arctic air that's going to spread southward rapidly toward the end of next week and meet up with a developing storm system across the eastern United States. As we move closer to Christmas Day, you can see that we have this big chunk of Arctic air that breaks loose and comes southward. This is now the 23rd that we're looking at, with our low pressure system, according to this model, which is the GFS, developing somewhere over the mid-Atlantic area, with strong winds on the backside and very cold air in place to support snowfall. Eventually the system does intensify and spread up the eastern seaboard. The exact position and movement of the system, how long it hangs around over the mid-Atlantic or northeast, varies depending on which model you look at. But what we are fairly confident with regarding this system is that any snow that does fall from the northeast down to the mid-Atlantic and back to the Midwest and Great Lakes prior to Christmas will likely remain on the ground through Christmas Day, as it is going to turn very cold and very windy behind this system, and that should allow the snow to remain on the ground through Christmas Day. If we take a look at the GFS at the surface, we're now out here around the 20th, late in the afternoon of the 20th, and we can see the beginnings of our system out here. This is the impulse that's going to lead to the development of a much stronger system across the eastern United States. This system will dig southeastward with a strong upper level trough digging into the central United States around the 23rd, late in the day of the 22nd into the early morning of the 23rd. But we also have a system developing off the coast as well. So here's our surface low developing off the coast, and here's our big upper trough back over the Midwest and Ohio Valley. How these two interact will be key in how the system evolves as it moves northeastward. If these systems can remain disjointed, with a separate low moving northward along the coast prior to the upper trough moving in, then we may see a couple waves of snow move through the mid-Atlantic and northeast, but it wouldn't be as intense. However, if the two can phase, then we could see a much stronger system, similar to what the European model is showing, somewhere across the mid-Atlantic or eastern Great Lakes regions, spreading up into the northeast, and that could bring much heavier snowfall. Right now the GFS shows the system one low moving northward up along the coast of Maine, with the trough digging in and developing a second stronger low pressure system off the North Carolina or Virginia coast, and bringing heavy snow to the cities of Baltimore, Washington, down into eastern Virginia as we head into late in the day on the 23rd or early morning of the 24th, with also some heavy snow, high ratio snow in the cold air on the backside of the system up into the eastern Great Lakes and back into the Ohio Valley. Here is the Canadian model's version of the same system. Here we are with the system out west, coming down through the northern Rockies, and as it spreads southeastward, it digs the trough further north into the Ohio Valley instead of digging it into the southeastern U.S. as the GFS had. Because it's further north, it can catch on to the surface low that also develops further north and more off the mid-Atlantic coast, or even inland a little bit in the mid-Atlantic, so the two systems can phase into a much stronger storm somewhere over the mid-Atlantic area. Because the system develops a little further to the west and is a little stronger, heavy snow can fall across portions of the northern mid-Atlantic and eastern Great Lakes, but coastal areas from New England down into the mid-Atlantic area see mixed precipitation or even plain rain, and some heavy rain across portions of New England would be possible. And here we have the European model. This is off Pivotal Weather, and it shows the system over the northern Rockies, comes down around the 21st into the 22nd. And as it spreads southeastward, it rapidly intensifies and deepens across the Ohio Valley into the eastern Great Lakes, with low pressure developing along the east coast. But the two systems are able to phase quite nicely along the mid-Atlantic coast, and this develops into a very strong storm across portions of the mid-Atlantic area, with the storm actually hooking back toward the west into portions of northern Pennsylvania and southern New York. And this, if this solution were correct, this would bring blizzard conditions to portions of the eastern Great Lakes and upper Ohio Valley during the day on the 23rd. So based on all this data that we have, we can make certain predictions and assumptions based on the overall pattern that we're going to have. On this map, I've plotted the snowfall depth right now across the United States. Here we have the heavy snow on the ground from the recent storm across the upper Midwest, and the snow across the portions of New England and down in the northern mid-Atlantic from the storm that they currently have ongoing. Plus there's plenty of snow out over the mountains of the west. Some of the valley locations in the west will probably lose some snow over the next several days, as it will be turning milder out there, but the high mountains will probably keep their snowpack intact. For areas east of the Rockies, anywhere north of the line that I've drawn on here, we'll probably see a white Christmas, and that area I would consider to be likely. With the second line I've drawn, the area between the two lines would be considered possible, and especially here along the mid-Atlantic coast, from actually the Maine coast down to the New England coast and into the mid-Atlantic area, including the cities of New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, down into central and eastern Virginia. This area is really tough at this time because it all depends on how that East Coast system evolves. We could end up with not much at all, or we could end up with a big snowstorm just before Christmas. It really all depends how that system evolves, and being a week away, there's no way to pin down the fine details. Areas south of this southern line really have a much lower chance of seeing a white Christmas at this time. So in summary, here's what we know. We know that there's going to be cold air. It's going to be expansive. It's going to cover much of the United States, especially east of the Rockies, for the week prior to Christmas. We also know that there's going to be a storm somewhere in the eastern United States in the days leading up to Christmas, probably the Thursday, Friday, possibly even into Saturday, Christmas Eve, right before Christmas. What we don't know is where exactly that storm will track, how strong it will be, and the exact locations that the snow will fall from that storm. So right now, best advice is just to stay tuned. If you have travel plans that weekend, best advice, just stay tuned. We'll provide additional updates as we get closer to the event and let you know what we expect to happen with that storm, and we'll provide additional updates on our White Christmas forecasts as we move forward as well. Stay tuned and be safe.